You don't know what you don't know, and what you don't know can hurt you. Welcome to Rising Crime. So I do these how safe is your city videos from time to time, and they basically just show the stats of the city, where the crime's at, and the level of the crime. And inevitably, I always get people that respond and say things like, well, I've lived in this city for 20 years and I've never had any problems. You're making up numbers. You're fear-mongering. And I'll respond and I'll say something like, well, maybe the statistics I got are wrong. Or, maybe you've just had a different experience with the city than what the statistics show. Or sometimes I'll just say that, maybe you've lived there long enough that it came on gradual enough that you didn't notice and you're not seeing just how bad it really is. And these guys will usually come back with something that says, now that I think about it, this or that. And they'll realize that even though they didn't believe it at first, after they heard it and then thought about it a little bit, they realized that things really are as bad as what the statistics I had shown were saying that they were. And usually when I cover a city, I'm covering it because it is bad. I'm not going to cover a city that's completely safe because nobody's going to care. I mean, it's not going to make them any difference to hear about a city that's completely safe, unless they plan on living there or moving there. So I came across this story about this girl in Syracuse, New York, Brexialee Torres. She's 11 years old, and she was the class president of her school. And she had gone to the local market to get some milk. And while she was walking home, a car pulled up, and there was a 19-year-old man who was standing outside in her vicinity, and a car pulled up and opened fire on him. Now, he got struck in the leg and was taken to the hospital, and he's completely fine. But she was struck in the body, and she died. She was a couple blocks from her house, and I imagine that her family didn't think anything of her going to the store because it was just up the street from their house. It was only a couple blocks away. And maybe she's done that a million times before, or they have, and they know that, and they feel like it's safe. But she had gone at 7:30 at night, so it was already dark out. And the city of Syracuse, New York, as a whole, the violent crime rate is 116% higher than the national average. Which that's about an average. Just if you're in a city, that's a major city, that's about an average number. That's not alarming, it's not good, but it's not alarmingly bad. But the neighborhood that this happened in is 426% higher than the national average. And it's one of the worst neighborhoods in the city. So they let this 11-year-old girl walk to the store in the dark, albeit only a few blocks away, to get milk. And I'm sure it was probably something simple like the mom says, hey, we don't have any milk for breakfast. And she goes, oh, hey, Mom, I'll go get some. And she went down to the store. I'm sure it was something as simple as that. But in one of the most dangerous neighborhoods of the city of Syracuse, she gets hit by a stray bullet. So this whole thing happens at this Food King store, or outside this Food King store, at the intersection of Oakwood Avenue and Martin Luther King East, which right there tells you a lot. And that store, ironically, is across the street from Dr. King Elementary School. So there's a double whammy on the safety of this area. But I'm sure the family didn't realize or wasn't thinking just how bad that neighborhood is. They may have known, they were probably aware, but maybe they lived there for a while and they were used to it and they weren't taking it as seriously because they become accustomed to it. I did a video recently on Minneapolis where I drove through all the bad areas of Minneapolis. And by the way, if you live in Minneapolis or you know somebody that lives in Minneapolis, you got to let them know that place is seriously like a ticking time bomb. It is just a matter of time till that place explodes. I started following them last summer, and I thought things were going to just explode last summer, and they never did. But they're getting to a point where they're not talking about it on the evening news of the things that are happening. I had driven through all the bad areas, and I drove through right after, this was a couple weeks ago, right after they had just gotten I think 2 feet of snow or something. So nobody was out on the street. It was 11 degrees out that day. Nobody was out. It felt completely safe to me. I felt completely fine driving through there. And these were all neighborhoods that had violent crime rates between 800 and 1,000 times worse than the national average. These are bad neighborhoods. I knew they were bad. I was driving through them knowing that. I drove through all of North Minneapolis. I came down, I went through downtown, and then I went down through Phillips neighborhood and over to the George Floyd Square. None of the neighborhoods felt unsafe to me, mainly, I believe, because of the snow. I never got that creepy feeling that you get when you feel like you shouldn't be there. When I was walking around George Floyd Square, though, I got a feeling at one point that I started asking myself, should I really be out here walking around? And I got that creepy feeling there. And of the neighborhoods that I had gone through, the George Floyd Square was the safest one. It wasn't a safe neighborhood. By Minneapolis standards, maybe it was of the safer ones, but it's not a safe neighborhood. But again, it was 11 degrees out. There was nobody walking around. I think I saw 1 or 2 other people. Not even that many cars on the street. And that was the only part of it that I felt that creepy feeling that I shouldn't be there. But I had driven through on a Friday at around 11 a.m. through downtown Minneapolis. And on the following Sunday, so two days later, early in the morning on that Sunday, like 3 a.m., they had a mass shooting at the corner of 10th and Hennepin, which was a road I pulled up to. I sat at the intersection and I said, I don't know a lot about this area, but I've heard of this road, and I know this road has stuff that happens on it. I hadn't researched that area enough to remember, so I didn't know. And literally the mass shooting happened right on that corner that I was sitting at the light at. The very next day after that, they had a second mass shooting. So 2 days in a row. And I was looking at a Twitter thing for the Crime News Minneapolis or Crime Watch Minneapolis or something like that is the Twitter feed of this guy. And they were sitting there talking about it, and they were kind of joking about it, how the news was not covering the mass shooting. They were covering things about deers and stuff like that, but they weren't covering the mass shooting. So the people living there probably are unaware, unless they looked online, because I did find an article on it online. I found an article when I went to do a video on the mass shooting. I found an article online that talked about it. But apparently, according to this guy, there wasn't news coverage of it. And when you read through all the comments and the people going back and forth, it really sounded like they weren't covering it on the local news, not on TV anyway. So the people living in this city likely didn't know that there were 2 mass shootings in 2 days. And the first one happened in downtown, and the other one happened, it was on Lake Street, and that's like south of downtown. And I didn't drive through that area, but that's another one of the areas that was bad. It just wasn't as bad as the neighborhoods that I had gone through, and the reason that I was kind of doing that drive through to see the really bad areas. But my point on this whole thing is, you can live in a city and have no idea how bad it is. No idea. Because the news isn't really, they'll tell you when there's a murder. They'll talk about it. I don't really watch the local news, so I don't know what they say in my neighborhood because I look at this stuff all myself. I research it. But they're not talking about it to the extent that they should be, because nothing's being done about it. So if you're relying on the evening news to tell you when things are safe and when things aren't safe, you're never going to get there. You're never going to know. So you kind of have to look up this stuff on your own, and you kind of have to, be aware that literally almost everywhere has gotten worse. Cities that used to, or areas that used to be like, yeah, that's kind of a bad area, but it's fine. Those areas are not fine anymore. They're bad now. They used to be fine, but they're not anymore because they're not putting people in jail like they used to, or they're releasing people on bond. And people just need to know where they live, know where you're going, especially if you have children. Don't send your child out in a bad neighborhood when it's dark, not by themselves or even with somebody. Go without that, gallon of milk for one day. Eat something else for breakfast, have a Pop-Tart or something. But things have gotten to a point where they don't want to talk about it and they don't want you to know about it. Just like these videos I do. I put these videos out all the time and YouTube just suppresses them. They don't want people to hear this stuff. They don't want people to know it's bad because they'll keep voting for these people that are allowing it to be bad as long as they think everything is good. If they knew how bad everything was, they would stop voting for the people that are letting it be bad. But, well, that's all I got for you today. But you don't know what you don't know. And what you don't know can hurt you.